What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? It is your boy, Matty Peveril, with another episode of Steelers War Room on Steelers Touchdown Under on YouTube, Steelers to TDU on Apple, Anchor, and Spotify. I'm excited to be with you all. Today's show, we're reacting to Daniel Jeremiah's latest top 50 prospects. He does these several times throughout the draft process alongside mock drafts. I listen to his show regularly, have done for kind of 12 plus years or however long it's been around. It's definitely over a decade now. And one of the things that's different about Daniel Jeremiah's rankings versus his mock draft, and he'll actually do like a top 150 right before the draft, and he'll sort of talks always about last few years having sort of 125, 130 guys, and the last 20 guys, it's really hard. Sometimes it's hard to fill them, and other years there's sort of 40 or 50 guys. He's got to just cut that down to 20. But the mock drafts are something that he does not where he thinks people should pick, what he's hearing from the league. One of the things that I think is interesting is there's been a bit of movement in this 4.0 version of his top 50. Now, this came out just about a week ago, right before Easter. I'm usually right across these with the Easter break, with other shows that Mark and I do. I haven't been able to get a chance to really sit there and have a look at it. But I started doing it, and I was looking at the top two guys, and then I thought, hang on, no. You guys deserve a real, we always try and be real on this channel, but you deserve a real reaction to it live. So I thought, why don't I run it through with you? I'll put you in the mind, like as the War Room series started when it was on BTSC and Steel Curtain Network as being, the idea was to put you in the minds of the GM, the War Room in the Steelers front office as they put together a winning roster in the coming season and a roster that could get a 7th Lombardi trophy. I try and put myself in their minds. I also try and bring what just my unique takes to things as well. You don't want to hear a robot. Otherwise, you can just watch Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers social media channels, website, and what have you. And also with the amount of effort that I put into, the draft process, there's lots of player profiles that I'll be doing between now and the draft. I've redone my big board of top 75 players across 3 days, and top 75 not based on everyone, all overall prospects. It's top 75 in terms of fits for the Steelers across 3 days of the draft. So I'll be able to. I'm excited to be launching that probably from the weekend onwards. And we'll cut that up and we'll put some of that content out for you all as well. But look, let's get into this reaction that we have across Daniel Jeremiah's 4.0 top 50. So I'm going to bring up on the screens. I like to show something visually so you don't have to look at my face the whole time. Now, the first guy's Bryce Young. I think that's kind of interesting with where people are sort of talking about Carolina Panthers, CJ Stroud. I'm not going to spend too much time because it doesn't really affect the Steelers. The Steelers aren't in there to pick a quarterback. But it is a quarterback off the board. That means that other positions fall. You then have Will Anderson. Now, I found this really interesting from DJ because he's been talking about Tyree Wilson and how don't be surprised to see Tyree Wilson picked ahead of Will Anderson Jr., just like Aiden Hutchinson was picked after Trayvon Walker last year. So this kind of caught my eye. I thought it was interesting. But, ultimately, I don't think those two guys are falling to the Steelers, even if one of them falls a couple of spots. I don't see it. I don't really think with Highsmith and TJ, Will Anderson is worthy of a pick, even if we were picking that high. Equally, unless you really aren't going to re-sign Highsmith. Equally, when it comes to Tyree Wilson, I think he's better in a 4-3. I think that's where he's gonna find a lot of value. Next guy's Bijan Robinson. Now, obviously, Bijan's maybe he goes 10 to the Eagles if they don't trade out of that spot. Otherwise, you're Chicago. The rumor is Steelers are talking to them, but maybe Chicago if they had that pick. I think they should improve their O-line in front of Justin Fields, but maybe you go, hey, we'll bring in Bijan and do a double threat there. But Bijan is considered the third best prospect in the draft. Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks have been talking a lot about how he is a Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley type. He can do everything. And it's cool because his backup at Texas, if those of you don't know as well, I'm a Longhorns fan, his backup, Roschon Johnson, will be a really capable starter in the NFL. And he's probably a 4th rounder at this point. I do have him on my list just purely because if he was sitting there and the Steelers taking BPA, I'd love them to pick him. But going back to Bijan, someone's going to pick him up. We're all going to look back and go, oh my God. Now, yes, running backs, the question is, are they worth the first round pick? We've kind of been through that. There was a bit of Steeler community going through that with Najee this season. But think about the 5th-year option. Then you got a franchise tag. You can get the best 6 years out of a running back. Move them on. You saw that basically with what the Cowboys have done now with Ezekiel Elliott as well. Number 4, Tyree Wilson. Obviously, we talked about him just before, so I'm going to go into there. Jalen Carter, number 5 in this top 50. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things going on outside of, just his pure potential as a prospect. There's a lot going on in the drink driving situation, and the drag racing that he was part of. There's the fact that in his pro day he didn't do several parts of the drills, didn't run. So he had also he put on 20 to 30 pounds. I think they said it was definitely more than 10. James Jeremiah talks here about, he's got the ability to play a 40 to 50 pounds lighter. To me, it's like, but what are you weighing in at? Don't get me wrong. If the Steelers are picking number 5, or if he's on the board when the Steelers are picking, it'll be hard to say no to Carter. But I do think Carter will not be a top 5 pick. He won't be picked earlier than what the Seahawks would do in picking him if they stay in the 5th position. You then have Devin Witherspoon. Now, I thought this was interesting because you've seen him rise above the boards, above Christian Gonzalez. Now, there's some draft pundits out there that think he's the best overall cornerback ready to go now. There's others that believe it's Christian Gonzalez. A lot of people looking into the height and the weight and the speed of Gonzalez. So I thought this was interesting because they've kind of jostled around, but considering how high he's up, I was actually kind of thinking he might have fallen to the Steelers a little bit, particularly the Steelers were happy to move up to 15 or 13. I thought they might have been able to grab Devin Witherspoon. I do kind of find it hard to think that he's going to slip past 13 with something like this. And people know about the value of Gonzalez as well. Now, remember, DJ is ranking these players on his best prospects to become pros in the NFL. CJ Stroud, 7. Again, quarterback not going to go in there. Peter Skoronski. Now, I don't see him being there for the Steelers. He's actually not in my top 75 purely for that reason. I don't think he'll be there when the Steelers are picking. Even if the Steelers trade up to 9. I don't know why we'd go after Skoronski at considering what we've got in the interior. Yes, he's got his versatility, but there's some tackles that we're going to get to in the next as we go through this list that I think will be better off for the Steelers. You then have Dalton Kincaid. Now, where tight end's probably not getting picked top 10, I don't think, especially even though he's a bit like a Kyle Pitts. I don't see that. He'll probably be in the 20s somewhere. Maybe he falls into the teens. But a really good player in Dalton Kincaid, really good player. Then they've got Anthony Richardson. Now, I kind of find this funny. Yes, I know he can, he's got a pretty decent arm. Yes, I know, at least from a power perspective, not necessarily accuracy. Yes, I know he's an amazing athlete, tests like various other positions. I just find this funny as a 10th because I think that there's other better quarterbacks still ahead of him between, Stroud and Bryce Young, between those two and Richardson. Guys like Hendon Hooker, I think even Will Levis really is ahead of them. So I kind of find this funny. Now, Christian Gonzalez is back at 11. Now, he's risen up 2 spots. And that was kind of interesting with just the general consensus. Devin Witherspoon stayed there. But DJ moved these guys, I think it was in a 1 or 2.0, around a little bit. Gonzalez, off the top of my head, is a 6'2" guy. He's a 205-pounder. Obviously, their weight fluctuates throughout this, draft process as well. A lot of guys are a lot skinnier than, or in Bryce Young's case, in quarterbacks, they usually put on the size that they're not going to play at. But Christian Gonzalez is there at 11. If we're trading up, I've seen a lot of things on Steelers, Steeler Nation out there on social media around this is the guy they got to go up and pick. Fine, I'm happy with it. If they're going to pick a corner in round 1, I'd prefer it this guy, Devin Witherspoon, and not Joey Porter Jr. unless they've traded back. Even then, I still don't think Joey Porter's a top 32 pick in the Steelers defense and with the Steelers needs right now. You then have Will Levis at 12. Not going to go into that too much. Jordan Addison at 13, down 4 spots. I see a lot of people there saying draft him if he's sitting there at 17. Again, I'd draft him at 32. I wouldn't draft him at 17. I think there's other needs for the Steelers. We've got 2 capable guys in the first 2 receiving spots. The Matt Canada offense, I don't know if it's got room for 3 wide receivers if you bring a guy of Addison's ilk in, plus Freemuth, plus Najee. I don't know. That makes a heck of a ton of sense. Then you got Luke Van Ness at 14. Now, Luke Van Ness is a guy that would need to put up some size to fit within what the Steelers do within 3-4 and being a defensive end. He's about 275, 280 pounds. He's got the frame. I think he's 6'6", off the top of my head. He's got the frame there to put on that size, but I don't think he helps you in year one as much as what you'd probably want if you were trading up into a 14. You then have Darnell Wright, who's rocketed up the list. Now, that's because of his athleticism. Look, he's a guy that has played at left tackle. Everyone's sort of punching him in the hole of right tackle. He has played really well against guys like Will Anderson Jr. I really like him. Don't be surprised if the Steelers don't move at 17. This could be the guy they get. And I believe they could get him over Paris Johnson. I agree with DJ here. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about trading up to 9 that I've seen this week. And it's well, let's draft Paris Johnson. I'm not convinced on Paris Johnson. People might say, Matt, what tape are you watching? I like the guy at 17 and I like the guy at 15 on Daniel's list, on Daniel DJ's list, better than Paris Johnson. So if all three are available, I'm probably going Jones, Wright, then Johnson. It's just how I see it. I just think the size of what Jones can do, the run game, what he can do. And DJ talks about this here. There's times when I question some of the pass pro that he does, and he plays, and this playing high at times is interesting because my understanding he was 6'4", but I've since saw something earlier this evening that said he was 6'6". So I think for me, I don't know. Something I don't like about Paris Johnson. I just don't. When I've seen some of his play, I don't know. I think he's a top 10 pick, top 10 20 pick, and I think I just rather the other things that guys like Broderick Jones and Darnell Wright, which is purely just their size, bring to the table, and there's a bit of athleticism there as well. Then you got Nolan Smith at 18. I don't think the Steelers are going to go in every edge rusher there. Mark and I talked about on TDU this past week, TDU boys, that the Steelers have drafted linebacker, whether outside or inside, more than any other position in the first round in the Colbert era, so year 2000 and to now. I just don't see it, though, with their current setup with Highsmith and TJ Watt. You then have Jackson Smith and Jigba. Again, I think even though he's 19, he's probably going a lot earlier than 19 in the draft. Not someone that I really think the Steelers are sitting there considering. And if you were weighing up between Smith and Jigba and Addison, from enough of what I hear from people around the league, the fact that he played alongside Wilson and Olave, and they said that he was one of the hardest guys to mark up against. I think he'll go ahead of Addison, but the Steelers would probably be more likely to pick Addison because of the relationship with Kenny Pickett. So it's a kind of a weird one to talk about wide receivers in the first round of the Steelers with a top 20 pick. You then have Joey Porter, who's dropped down 5 spots. Some people focus on if he didn't get any interceptions. That's not what I mind about. The thing that I, don't necessarily like is I don't think he is as good in zone coverage as what the Steelers would need him to be and how we want to play. I also think he allows, if guys get separation, it's going to be a problem on him. He's going to have penalties. That's what he did in college. And I didn't like that he didn't test in some of these things, some of these drills that cornerbacks traditionally test in at the combine. I thought that was weak. Like, yes, you've got to improve your draft stock. Yes, you should only do things that make you look good. But ultimately, there's cone drills and stuff like that. You just got to do them. To me, I don't like that, and I don't like that non-competitive nature. Understand the value, understand he wants to maximize his draft day potential, but I don't like it when guys aren't ready to compete. That's not a Pittsburgh Steeler to me. Then you got Michael Mayer, who, as I said, between Darnell Washington, Dalton Kincaid, he's kind of considered the second probably tight end on this list. He was number 1 all the way through the season. Didn't necessarily have the best season. Dalton Kincaid had a really good season. Didn't have a bad season, but I think it's that athleticism, those traits there that are separating Michael Mayer from Kincaid. Can do a bit more of everything, bit more of a Pat Freiermuth sort of type. If Pat Freiermuth was in this draft, I'd say you could pick him or Michael Mayer. I don't see too much difference there. You then got Zay Flowers, who's about 5'9", I think it is, about 171 pounds. Gun wide receiver. I love him. I think if the Steelers, he's there at 32, I'm picking him. I don't think you're going to see a massive drop-off between what he does in the league ultimately and what Addison does. I just don't. That might sound controversial, but he's a tough guy. Look at what Jamar Chase has done at his size. Zay Flowers can do that. I think the interesting thing about Zay Flowers that a lot of people aren't connecting with the Steelers, Boston College. Where does where does Mike Tomlin's kid play? Boston College. Just saying. Steelers may have seen a bit from Zay Flowers. I really like the way he plays. I think he'd open things up. I think he'd be a nice replacement in time for DJ as well, particularly if DJ doesn't have a great season this year. But I'm a big fan of Zay Flowers. I have been for a very long time. Then you got Miles Murphy, Clemson, edge. Now, he's a guy that's ranked 23 on DJ's list. Has floated anywhere between pick 10 and pick 25, or even pick 7 and pick 25, since the college season ended. He's about 6'5", 6'6", 275 pounds out of Clemson. Probably someone that a team with a 4-3 is going to pick. I wouldn't mind him. I don't like him at 17 for the Steelers. But if he starts falling, and remember, there's guys like Tomlin on this list that got picked in the 3rd round last year. So, not that obviously Tomlin not on this list, but there's guys in this list that could be picked much later. He was sitting there at 32 or 49, particularly 49. You'd be like, yes, please. Deontay Banks. I really like the Deontay Banks out of Maryland. He is about 6'2", a good tackler. I think he's about 203 pounds as well, so a bit more of the Christian Gonzalez size. Obviously didn't necessarily play at, a top college. But they talk about his blocked PAT here. He's an athletic guy. He's a competitor. He's tough. He smacks guys to the ground. I prefer him over Joey Porter. I just straight up draft him over Joey Porter every day. He plays more like the Joey Porter son. I'm a good fan of Deontay Banks, particularly at 32. If the Steelers go trenches at 17, this guy at 32, if he's sitting there, would be great. You then have Darnell Washington, who's the 6'6", 6'7", 270-pound tight end out of Georgia. He's just a massive dude. I talked about him a couple of weeks ago with Mark. I think it was TDU Boys on Mad Monday. And I just talked about the fact that you bring in a guy like him. I think we ended up picking him in a mock draft. You bring a guy like that in to the Matt Canada offense, blocking for Najee Harris as well, with Pat Freiermuth. A 2 tight end set that you could do with these two would be absolutely lethal, I reckon. And he's pretty fast and nimble as well. They talk about him having tremendous value as a 6 offensive lineman. If we didn't have the Matt Canada scheme, like we're in a Todd Haley situation, I don't know whether I'd be fully on this, or at least definitely not a Randy Finkley situation. I would not be on this because I don't think he'd be used properly. I do have a bit of faith that how he could be used in a Matt Canada offense. So Darnell Washington's interesting there. You then get to Will McDonald, who, he's ranked 26 on this list. He's a guy that is probably a 2nd rounder, maybe even an early 3rd rounder. I like him for the Steelers potentially. He caused a lot of trouble at the Senior Bowl. I know even Darnell Wright said that he was one of the toughest guys to deal with. He had an okay combine. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like, oh my God, wow. So I think Will McDonald's an interesting one. I wouldn't mind bringing him because I believe in 3-player rotation, but the Steelers have so many other needs for the first 3 picks that they've got in this draft, assuming they don't even trade them. He might be off the board. And apologies, you can hear the rain in the background. It's pouring here. Anyway, then you got Kalijah Cansey out of Pittsburgh. I don't see the Steelers doing 17 with this, picking 17 with this guy. Maybe 32. Again, I kind of feel like a 4-3 team is going to go after him. I just do. I don't know whether he fully fits what the Steelers need at these positions right now. You then got Keon White out of Georgia Tech. Again, he's going to be an edge guy. I've heard things. Some people are like, yeah, definitely 3-4. I've heard other people say no, he's a 4-3 guy. Very, very freak athlete. Probably scrapes in the back end of the first, or was in the first 10 spot pick in round 2. I just don't think the Steelers are in on Keon White, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. Jamar Gibbs out of Alabama, obviously sort of kind of came in following Najee's departure. Really good player, not Bijan Robinson. Otherwise, he's probably the clear number 2. Again, don't think the Steelers are going to be in for him unless there's something we don't know about Najee Harris. You then have Quentin Johnson, the 6'4", big guy out of TCU. Obviously, wide receivers from his conference haven't traditionally done particularly great once they've made it to the NFL. But DJ has compared him to Mike Williams. DJ watches Mike Williams every week, who plays for the Chargers. He's going to be a really good value guy. I mean, at 32, I wouldn't mind bringing I'd be more comfortable at 49. The Steelers draft him at 32, I wouldn't sit here and be crying and throwing my headset across the room. I get it. Again, I just don't think the Steelers play an offense where this guy's a really in the mix. Now, I've heard a lot about trading up. We'll get to the next guy, Brian Branch, at number 31. I've heard a lot of people talking about Steelers trade up to 9. They go get Brian Branch. Can do everything. He's still a player. Can do slot corner stuff. Can do a bit of safety stuff. Blah, 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 blah. I don't think you trade up to 9 to get this guy. I think this guy, you could sit where you are and hope he falls to you. The other funny thing about Brian Branch is that and we're going to I'm going to load it up now. I'm just going to check his weight because I've seen stuff that says 191 pounds. I've seen stuff that's like 200 pounds, 190 pounds here. According to NFL.com, they've gone off the combine. He was the 31st ranked cornerback in the draft, 4.58. Now, he plays faster than the 4.58 40 he ran, but that might hurt him. That might mean he falls to 17 with the Steelers. Still don't know I love it at 17. I kind of like it at 20 to 23, and if the Steelers trade back, fine. Don't know if I love it at 17. I haven't come around to that. I do think he's a good player. I do think he'll be value for the Steelers. I don't think he's the lockdown corner we really need. And I don't know why you'd be trading up all the way to 9 to not get Gonzalez or Witherspoon. If you don't get those guys and you're not picking O-line, I don't know why you're trading up to 9. And that could all just be talk as well. Then you got Felix out of Kansas State and Duke Uzama. He's a guy that the Steelers, I just don't see that. We're not in for this guy. He's a 4-3 player. You got Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin. He's anywhere in the 2nd or 3rd round, tall, athletic center. Now, you obviously got guys like Schmitz. You've also got Andrew Voorhees a bit later on in the draft out of USC. One of those guys is going to fall. This is the sort of guy like a Cole Strange last year that got picked by the Patriots. I could see the Steelers, or I could see the Patriots go after this guy, but I could see, even though people for the Steelers, you can imagine them trading back. He's a guy, he's just a guy that I think one of those teams in the late 20s will end up picking. I don't think the Steelers will be picking him at 17. I don't see that value. Then you get to Emmanuel Forbes, who I've heard is one of the actually most unsung cornerbacks in this draft. I really like him. He's made it into my top 75 as well. Now he's 6 foot or maybe 6'1". He's about 178 to 180 pounds, but he had 3 pick sixes, which is outlined here. He's super quick. He's on the ball. He's not afraid of anything. Then DJ cited it here. His tackling could improve, but his tape is really good. Like, he's a really good player. Whoever gets him in the 2nd or early the 3rd round is going to be very thankful they did. That's why I don't mind the Steelers. I don't particularly, unless they really love a Deontay Banks or Gonzalez or Witherspoon fall, I'd be happy to go get a guy like this and then go get another cornerback later on in the draft. So I really like Emmanuel Forbes. And so Steelers fans, watch out, particularly if to me, he's an AFC North player. I'd hate if one of our rivals in AFC North went out and got him. You then have BJ Ojolari, another edge player. Again, I'm probably not going to spend too much time talking about him. I don't think he's going to be a guy the Steelers are really looking at. You then have Osiris Torrance, who, again, if he's sitting there at 32, that could be a really good pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers interior line. He's 6'5", about 337 pounds, really big guy. People talked about him dropping a little bit of weight to get a bit more agile, a bit more lean muscle mass. But, as it says, DJ says here, teams that want to run downhill and create a firm interior in the passing game will appreciate Torrance. That is what we want from Kenny Pickett. I think that this is going to be really, really helpful. I think this getting to the 2nd level is also really important for the Steelers off O-line. I don't feel the Steelers over the last, it's been, numerous years now, get to the 2nd level enough. And that really hurts the run game and the way that the Steelers want to play with the pigskin. But so Osiris Torrance is definitely one to look out for, particularly if he slips out past the first 31 picks. You then have Brian Breesy, who I think, outside of Jalen Carter, is probably the top DT on the board. There's other guys later on like Keanu Benton, Siaki Ika. There's the guy out of Jared Clark out of Coastal Carolina, and there's, I think it's Jervin Dex to the 2nd. I think it's Florida State. But Brian Breesy, I really like Brian Breesy. He's probably my favorite outside Jalen Carter right now in terms of for the first sort of 40 picks. So look out. I do think he's someone the Steelers could like. Mike Tomlin had that reaction at the Clemson Pro Day. He's got a tough background. The Steelers will like that sort of stuff. It could be a really nice, swap out into the Steelers team for some of the defensive line changes we've had. And he's a guy that, you don't want to expect too much of a defensive lineman in year one, like Steel fans did with Cameron Hayward and was slightly disappointed. But he's a guy that year 2, 3, 4, and 5 would be terrific if you got him in the first round. You then have Cody Mork, who played everywhere. It's the senior ball over the O-line. He's listed as a tackle. Probably is going to play interior in the NFL. Probably is playing guard. Again, he's a bit like the Joe Tippmann piece of does a team in the late 20s get him? He could fall as far as the third round. I struggle to think he'll fall outside of the second round, which potentially where the Steelers go linebacker, because if they went Jack Campbell, for example, at 32, then Cody Mork, if he was sitting at 49, you'd be laughing with a pick like that. You'd be thrilled. Luke Musgrave, he's probably the consensus third tight end in the draft. Fourth tight end in the draft behind Mayer, Washington, and Kincaid. But in other drafts, he'd be like a top two. He didn't have a great 2022, but before that, he did a lot. Athletic guy, big guy. I think he's a 6'6" guy. Luke Musgrave, if the Steelers are looking at tight end in the second round, I think that's still probably a little bit early. I think they're open to it. They might be open to it in the third round. Unless they really like him, I think that's where you maybe see a fit there. But I think he'll be off the board by the time the Steelers would be happy to spend a pick on him. Then I have Jalen Hyatt. I've seen lots of stuff over the last 3 or 4 months from Steelers fans about Jalen Hyatt. I think he's 6'1". He's about 170 pounds, 175 pounds. Really quick guy. I think someone will pick him before the Steelers would be happy with it. You then have Mazi Smith, who is Bruce Feldman's number one athletic guy, in the draft. The Steelers looked at him a lot, apparently, at the Michigan Pro Day. Now, it's funny with Bruce Feldman. He was on Rich Eisen recently, and I have never seen someone in the NFL circles preference athletic traits over tape as much as I did from Bruce Feldman. I was actually in dead shock that he ignored stuff that's on tape and was still talking about guys, playing really, really well. Really, I was absolutely flabbergasted of how much he dismissed tape. But anyway, putting that aside, he's a guy who loves athletic traits. That's Mazi Smith. Mazi Smith is someone that, again, I think anywhere between pick 20 and up to pick 60, I'd be surprised if he fell out of the top 60. But, defensive tackles, particularly, he's a year 1 to 2 technique. I don't think you're going to, those guys aren't going crazy high in the NFL draft right now, unless they're super athletic, super rare traits like your Jalen Carters, etc. Now, then you got Sam Laporta, another tight end. I think he's sort of the consensus 5th, 6th tight end in the draft. Very athletic, played at Iowa, limited offense. People haven't really liked his tape. I don't see him, unless, this is a guy that and the Steelers went out to Iowa Pro Day. Maybe the Steelers would sit there and say, well, hey, he's fallen to us. We've seen enough on tape. He can do it. But again, I don't think that in the top 50 picks where the Steelers currently to date have 3 picks. You then have Trenton Simpson, who's a linebacker, really athletic guy. Some people sort of think he can play inside and outside. They talk about him being excellent man coverage. I don't love the tape. I don't think he makes fast enough decisions. Now, yes, he's only really moved over to linebacker the last couple of years. I don't like DJ's talked about his speed and athleticism translating well. I've heard of DJ talking on a podcast, not on an article where he's got it in writing. I've talked about a lot of podcasts. He didn't love the traits. Now, maybe DJ's watched more tape and he thinks differently. I've watched him tape. I don't think he's got some of those inherent traits that, yes, he does athletically, but not up here in the head that we necessarily as Steel fans expect of our linebackers. And considering all the criticism of Devin Bush, I don't think the Steelers can afford to take a flyer on another linebacker. They got to pick a guy that can be in there for the next 6-7 years minimum. You then have Hendon Hooker. We talked a little about him, cornerback, rising up the boards. Then you got one of my favorite players in the entire draft, Steve Avila, 6'5", 6'6", 334 pounds. I think it is off the top of my head. I've talked about him so many times since Mark and I started Steelers Touchdown Under, the YouTube channel. I've talked about him on back when we were with Behind the Steel Curtain Network from the first week of the college season. I love him as a Steeler. Second round, 32, 49. If you can get him later, great. You know, he can play anywhere in the interior. Tough guy, big guy, good temperament. You know, he's apparently being brought in for a Steelers visit. I love that. One of the best things I've heard. Bring him in at 49. That would be fantastic. You wouldn't regret it. Keely Ringo, a guy now. Originally, I'd had him. The Steelers back. If you rewind the tape a year ago to just up like before the draft, I was like, this guy, 2023 NFL draft. Steelers pick him no matter where they can, even if they got to trade up in the mid-teens to get him. 6'2" guy, yeah, really athletic. Tested well at the combine. Problem was he didn't have as good a year this year. He's fallen down the boards. I still think he's a day. He'll definitely a day 1 or 2 pick. Maybe falls in the back of the first. I don't know. I think he's more like a mid to back of the second. If you fell later than that, then maybe even trade up to go get a guy like this. But again, it will depend on where the Steelers actually end up picking at 17. You then have Keanu Benton, who's a really good defensive tackle out of Wisconsin. He talked about the Steelers meeting with him at the Senior Bowl. I really like him. I think he's a great player. I just think he's a really good pick at like pick 80 in the third round for the Steelers. And this is the first time he's made it into DJ's top 50. You'll be happy with him or Mazai Smith, but you'd have to draft Mazai Smith will probably go off the board a lot earlier than Keanu Benton. Well, not a lot earlier. He'll go before Keanu Benton, and then you'll probably see Benton within the next, I reckon, 8 picks or so. Then you got John Michael Schmitz, probably one of the other key centers in this draft. Pretty much a center, even though it's got interior offensive line for him. A lot of people talking about him, the Steelers. I think he's being brought in for the visit for the Steelers. I don't like him at pick 17. No, I wouldn't hate 32, but I think it would have been an overdraft. 49, fine. You then get Jack Campbell. Now, it's interesting because he's rated after John Michael Schmitz. I would be happy with Jack Campbell at 32. 6'5", 238 pounds or more. Maybe he's in the 240s, I think, now. Trades with Luke Kuechly. Loved him since all the tape I've seen. You know, he's not necessarily going to be the wow guy that means that he gets drafted like as high as Devin Bush. Some people might have Trenton Simpson higher than him. You draft this guy, you've got a linebacker that's a starting level linebacker for the next 6 or 7 years. You just do. And if you used a first round pick on him, particularly if you trade it back into the 20s, you get the 5-year deal. And that'd be good time to judge him before you have to pay him. So yeah, I like Jack Campbell. And I also think he can be used outside a little bit more if you had to than what a lot of people think. Look, he's not the coverage linebacker. There's other guys in the draft like Dane Henley out of Washington State, Toto. There's a few other guys that I'll be talking about in my top 75 that fill that need. But this is a guy that improves the Steelers. And you pair him with Holcomb, oh boy, you know, that's a lot more fear. You know, that strikes a lot more fear into an opponent than Holcomb, Landon Roberts, Mark Robertson. And the final player on DJ's list is Zach Charbonnet. He's really liked Zach Charbonnet going back well over, a couple of years now. He's talked about him, particularly at the start of the 2021 college season. Yeah, when Zach Charbonnet in the first 3 or 4 games had 6 TDs, was doing a ton of stuff. He's a day one starter according to DJ. I think he's about 6'1" or 6. Yeah, I think he's 6'2" and 212 pounds, 220 pounds, something between that range. Big guy. DJ talks about him running high. He does. You kind of wonder, he's like a classic H-back. I wonder whether teams will put him in tight end sets. But someone will go out and get him. I think someone particularly that plays in a warmer climate will really like bringing Zach Charbonnet in, particularly how he's successful in a warm climate out there at UCLA. But look, with that, that's going to pretty much wrap up this week's Steelers War Room. I just wanted to do a reaction video to DJ's top 50. I've always sort of done podcasts the last couple of years on that. And so really excited for the draft coming up. If you don't agree with some of the things I've said, definitely comment in the live chat. We're not doing a live chat, but put something in the comments. We do get a lot of comments on the channel, which is great. I love hearing them. I love seeing them. Some of them are really long and in depth. It's just about getting through them. We're trying to reply to as many as we can. But if you're not a subscriber to the show, feel free to hit the subscribe button. If you are, hit the like button if you like the show. Hit the dislike if you didn't. I'll try and improve next time. And if you haven't hit the bell icon, if you are subscribed, if you have liked the show, do so. You get the notifications when we go live. Mark and I will be live again sort of Friday, 5-6 p.m. East Coast when we do the next TDU or Touchdown Under Boys show. But with that, as always, go Steelers.